Please sit in a comfortable meditation posture and close the eyes. Put your attention on the silence that is always there deep in the mind. Connect with that silence. Become the silence. You are the silent witness. Now listen to the words of the Yoga Vasishtha, Book 5, Chapter 24, continuing with verse 16. Bali asked, Sage, how are we to quell the mind? Tell me plainly, that I may use that method to conquer this invincible barrier to bliss. Varochana answered, the means for subduing the mind are the lack of reliance or confidence in all external and sensible things, and the absence of all desire for temporal possessions. This is the best method to remove the great delusion of this world and to subdue the big elephant of the mind. This method is both very easy and practical on one hand, and it is arduous and impractical on the other. A constant habit of thinking so makes it easy, but lacking the habit renders it difficult. A gradual habit of renouncing our fondness for temporal objects shows itself in time in our resignation of the world, just as continuous watering the roots of plants makes them grow into large trees. It is difficult to master anything, even by the most cunning, without proper cultivation over time, just as it is impossible to reap a harvest from an unsown and uncultivated field. All embodied souls are destined to wander about the wild wilderness of the world as long as their hearts do not surrender their attachments to the objects of sense in nature. Without the habit of apathy, it is impossible to have a distance or distaste for sensible objects, just as it is impossible for an able-bodied man to travel abroad by sitting motionless at home. The firm determination to abandon the entanglements of life and a habit of habitual aversion to pleasures and enjoyments makes a man advance to purity, just as a plant grows in open air to its full height. There is no good to be derived on earth without the exertion of one's courage. Man must give up his pleasure and the vexation of his spirit in order to reap the fruit of his actions. People speak of destiny as if it were a power Yet destiny has no shape or form. It means whatever comes to pass, and it is also called our lot or fate. The word destiny is also used by men to describe an accident over which they have no control and to which they submit with passive obedience. They use the word destiny to repress our joy and grief. However, fixed as fate is overcome and set aside by means of courageous efforts. It is the delusion of a mirage to dispel the light of its true nature. So courageous effort upsets destiny by effecting whatever it wishes to bring about. If we want to know what causes the good or the bad results of our actions, we must learn that they turn as the mind wishes, to mold them to being. Whatever the mind desires and decrees, the same becomes destiny. There is nothing destined in the ordinary sense of the word. It is the mind that does all this. The mind is the employer of destiny. The mind destines the destined acts of destiny. Life, the living soul, is spread out in the hollow sphere of the world like air in vacuum. The psychic fluid circulates through all space. Destiny is no reality, only a label invented to express the property of fixity, as the word rock is used to denote stability. Hence, as long as the mind retains its free will and activity, there is no fixed fate or destiny. So what Varochana is describing here is literally the process of performing spiritual practice, sadhana, on a daily basis. In order to balance the karmic traces. It is a constant habit, but lacking the habit results in no progress. During this constant habit of meditation, transcending, touching the karmic traces, balancing them with the mantra, balancing them with the silent witness. Mantra is the sound vibration of the silent witness. This is what cultivates the mind to make it possible for us to finally experience and become the silence that's deep in the mind. And through this regular practice of thinking the mantra and letting it go, we're learning the art of acting without being attached to the fruit of the action or attached to the action itself. He says, without the habit of apathy, it is impossible to have a distaste for sensible objects. What is apathy? Apathy is not caring, not being attached, letting go. And then he goes into this concept of destiny, which is literally just the pressure of karmic traces. As we discover in our Jyotish, we see the karma that is acting as a pressure or wind to push the life in a certain direction. We can just let go and go in that direction. Or we can use the one ability that we have, and that is to direct the mind inward and think a thought, think a mantra. When we think a mantra, we're expressing a vibration in consciousness that is like an arrow. And that vibration in consciousness points to the silent witness. Because every time you think the mantra, after that thought, there is a gap. There is the silent witness. So this whole process of meditation is so wonderfully engineered to be a process of engaging in a very refined activity of thinking, a sound, and letting go of that sound. And when we let go of the sound, we touch the underlying silent witness. Then we think the sound, let go and touch the underlying silent witness. This is cultivation of the mind. To be established in the silence of the silent witness. He says, whatever the mind desires and decrees, the same becomes destiny. It is the mind, the collection of individual karmic traces, that is responsible for creating more individual karmic traces. As long as we allow the mind to continue to exist, we are always stuck in the quagmire of karmic traces. But the silent witness is beyond all karmic traces. So we use the mind to let go of everything and become the silent witness. And in that process, the realization dawns that destiny is no reality. It's only a label, invented to express the property of fixity. As the word rock is used to denote stability. Hence, as long as the mind retains its free will and activity, there is no fixed fate or destiny. As long as the mind retains the ability to become the silent witness and let go of all the activity of the karmic traces, we are transcending our karma. There are two levels of karma: individual karmic traces and divine karmic traces. Our task to achieve Brahman consciousness is to balance all individual karmic traces 100%. And then transcend all divine karmic traces. Let go of and transcend all divine karmic traces. Divine karmic traces ultimately is what gives us our individual form in an incarnation as a human being, gives us our body. It gives us our body in a perfect form, in the image of the Creator. Our karmic traces, individual karmic traces, distort that individual form and make it look like something else, make it act like something other than the Creator. But our objective in Brahman consciousness is to become and transcend the Creator, to become the silent witness of the Creator. After the mind is set at rest, there remains the principle of the living soul, the jiva. This is called the embodied spirit, or Purusha, which is the source of the energies of the body and mind. Whatever the living soul intends to do by means of its spiritual force, the same comes to take place, and nothing else. Relying on this spiritual power will uproot your dependence on bodily food. So here we understand that dependence on bodily food results from a lack of reliance on spiritual power. The first connection of spiritual power to the physical body is the pranamaya kosha. So our objective is total integration of physical body with pranamaya kosha. And that will result in the lack of need for bodily food. There is no hope for spiritual happiness until there is a distaste toward temporal enjoyments. It is hard to attain the dignity of the all-conquering self-sufficiency as long as one has the dastardly spirit of his earthly cravings. As long as one is swinging in the cradle of worldly affairs, it is hard to find rest in the covered shelter of peaceful tranquility. It is hard to get rid of your serpentine desires without continued practice of detachment and unconcern with worldly affairs. Bali replied, "Tell me, O Lord of demons, how does indifference to worldly enjoyments take deep root in the human heart and produce the fruit of longevity of the embodied spirit on earth?" Rochana replied, "The sight of the inner spirit produces indifference to worldly things, just as the growth of vines produces grapes in autumn. The sight of the inner spirit produces our internal unconcern with the world, just as the glance of the rising sun infuses its brightness in the cup of the lotus. Therefore, sharpen your intellect with the whetstone of right reasoning. See the Supreme Spirit by withdrawing your mind from worldly enjoyments." There are two modes of intellectual enjoyment for those who are imperfect in their knowledge. One consists of book learning. The other is paying attention to the teacher's lectures. Those who are a little advanced in learning have the double advantage of their mental enjoyment, namely reflecting on book learning in consultation with wise teachers on practical points. Those who are accomplished in learning also have two parts to their duties, namely the profession of teaching the scriptures to others and the practice of detachment for themselves. The soul being purified, and man is fit for spiritual learning, as only clean linen is fit to receive every good color. Like a boy on the path of learning, the mind is to be restrained by degrees, by means of persuasion and good lectures, and then by teaching scriptures. And lastly, by discussion of their doctrines. After its perfection in learning and the dispersion of all difficulties and doubts, the mind shines like a piece of pure crystal and emits its brightness like cooling moonbeams. Then, by its complete knowledge and clear understanding, it sees in both its God, the Spirit, and its body as the seat of its enjoyments on earth. It constantly sees spirit before it by means of its understanding and reason, which also help the mind relinquish its desires for worldly objects and enjoyment. Now let us continue, established as the silent witness, and balance all karmic traces that have arisen in the mind as thoughts during this reading of the Yoga Vasishta by the practice of Trimana Sanyama on the esoteric Mahamantra. Jai Gurudev.